If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that a video of small cafe racers has become something of an annual tradition. A bit like Christmas, but with more noise, oil, and far fewer disappointing socks. For those who can't afford a fire-breathing superbike, think of this as your annual dose of inspiration. And for those of you who can, don't panic. Because if it works on a small bike, it'll work on yours too. Today, there will be 3 projects built with the right classic ingredients: perseverance, dedication, and an absolutely unhealthy amount of passion. Welcome to Racer TV. So, before we dive into the first project, I've actually got some good news. From now on, if you prefer my videos with the old classic voice, just click the little settings button at the bottom of the video window, or in the top right corner if you're watching on a phone, and select the British English audio track. It's not perfect yet, more like a work in progress, but give me time. I'll get there. Now, at this point, some of you are probably thinking, nice cafe racer, but I've seen better. If this is you, just take a look at the before and after. It changes everything, doesn't it? It's like watching Clark Kent finally remember he's Superman. Who would have thought that an ordinary Suzuki Raider 150 could become something of a rock star? This, ladies and gentlemen, is another small miracle by Shiegfred Phyle Dichos and his team at Garahe Motorcycles in the Philippines. I showed some of their builds a couple of years ago, and honestly, these blokes seem to have an instinct for perfect proportions, and this Suzuki is further proof of that. Now, if I wanted to exaggerate, I'd tell you this thing has 3 gears. Here, there, and gone. It's got the power of infinity and beyond. But unfortunately, I can't say that, because it's not super fast and has a 6-speed transmission. 145 kilometers per hour top speed if original, and around 180 if modified. Still, for a 150cc bike, that's rather impressive. As you can see, the transformation level here is nothing short of biblical. According to Shiegfred Phyle, this is actually the second version of the project. A sequel, if you will. The first version is this one, which I presented 2 years ago. Both are based on the Suzuki Raider 150, though depending on where you live, it might go by a slightly different name, because Suzuki apparently likes to confuse people. Now, this section here, that's the only bit left from the original frame. Everything else, including this rather Ducati Monster-esque subframe, was built completely from scratch. The swing arm has been reinforced and extended by 5 centimeters. And it now has rear footrests, which brings us to what you already suspected. Yes, the custom-made rear cowl is removable. A sort of polite middle finger to anyone who says a cafe racer can only carry 1 person. And here's another clever bit, for bikes that still rely on a good old-fashioned kickstarter. Except for the universal fuel tank from Red Indian Customs, just about everything else has been hand-built or violently modified until it surrendered. Overall, an excellent example of what it can be done with a small motorcycle. But now, let's move on to another beautiful machine with a slightly different attitude. This one leans more toward the retro vintage vibe, with just enough modern touches to remind you it's not actually from 1972. It is based on a Honda TMX 150 Supremo. For those who aren't aware of, it is basically identical to the very well-known Honda GL 150. Unlike the last build, this one takes a much more classic route. But don't confuse classic with easy. Originally, this thing came with 2 rear shocks, and most people would have left it at that. Not Shiegfred Phyle, because instead of using the original frame structure, he decided to build a new subframe. The big question is, why? Is this new subframe really that necessary? And the answer is here. Take a look at what many consider one of the greatest Honda CB 550 Cafe builds ever made. Now compare the proportions. They're shockingly similar. And that's the magic trick. But notice the difference in this central frame section. If Shiegfred Phyle hadn't changed this tube, this triangular section would have been too big. And that, my friends, is one of the great secrets of small bike cafe racer design. Nothing can be too big. Nothing can be too small. Everything must be perfectly in proportion, like a suit tailored by someone who actually knows what they're doing. And now, we come to the third and final project of today's video. Just one glance at the paint on that fuel tank, and I bet you already know which brand we're dealing with. And if you said Honda, you're probably watching the wrong channel. Because this, obviously, is a Yamaha. The big question, of course, is which Yamaha? Don't worry if you haven't got a clue, because this is one of those transformations where even Yamaha themselves would have trouble recognizing it. This is another one of those where the transformation is simply mind-blowing. It's gone from the kind of bike your neighbor ignores to the kind that makes him move house. Think less Mary Poppins and more Mad Max. This, or rather, this used to be a Yamaha Sniper 150, also known by about a dozen other names depending on which corner of the planet you're on. The overall approach is similar to the first project we looked at, which means that this little section right here is all that remains of the original frame. Everything else has been completely rebuilt from scratch, because apparently Shiegfred doesn't believe in half measures. This time, though, he went a step further. The swing arm has been replaced with a new one from Livinger, slightly longer, vastly prettier, and giving the whole bike a much meatier stance. It's the sort of detail that makes you wonder how something this small can look this heroic. So, what else can I say about Shiegfred's work? He's still one of the best in the business when it comes to small displacement motorcycles. And honestly, it's always a pleasure watching him perform these little mechanical miracles, turning modest commuter bikes into machines that look ready to pick a fight with bikes twice their size. Thank you for watching Racer TV. And as always, I hope to see you on the next video.